So last time what we did was we created the basic application where we have a greeting.greet message, where the greet message is coming from the KMM itself. And for this implementation, we have got some data the um, from API, SpaceX API, which is like the default implementation that you would see. And also we did the same application with iOS, but unfortunately that day we could not get it running. So today I have prepared that. I think we should be able to get that one as running as well without an issue. Yeah, you can see the loading section, and you will see the last successful launch was on this day and everything. Okay, so let me go through one time with the application which we written in iOS. Okay, so iOS, as you guys know, when we are writing KMM application, the default one, or the default UI framework that we will be using is what we call the Swift UI. Okay, so Swift UI is like Flutter, Jetpack Compose. Those are like structural reactive programming algorithms are here, and the UI itself, everything that we do is going to be written in code. So this is like the starting point of our application, and it has a body, and it's belong to a one window group, and window group has these things called content view. Okay, content view is something we have created right around here. So you guys can see that content view has a view model that we have created, and we are getting values from the view model dot text. So whatever we want to show, whatever the values we are interested in showing is coming from view model dot text. Sorry, view model dot text. Okay, so this is kind of the preview that we are seeing in here. I think if we resume it, we should get a preview of the content view. Okay, so we are using the preview provider to do such a thing. So preview provide is optional, but it's help us with creating a dummy or a live preview of our application. So that makes things a little bit easier rather than running on something like in the simulator. Okay, you can do that as well. So the content view, it is what we are interested in showing. I will hide this for now. And the body, the content view is some sort of view. We call this structural thing. So this is some view. Okay. So the body is expecting a view to be returned, and that's gonna be a text view that we are seeing in here. And the text it should show is coming from this view model. Okay, so if you look in the view model definition, it's like what we have seen in Android. Okay, so we have the view model definition, the class name itself, and we should inherit or we should extend the observable object that's indicating okay, this is gonna have changing it's gonna have changing values. Okay, so the first value that we are listening into this variable called text. Okay, initially it has the value of loading and three dots. Okay, and by annotating this with publish, that means somewhere this will be changed, and according to that, the UI should always should be already the UI should also adapt that changes. Okay, so by initializing this class, the view model class, we are waiting to get some values from the greeting class. Okay, so we are getting the greeting class. Where does this greeting class coming from? It is coming from the shared module that we have, which is a Kotlin compiled code. So if I look at the greet method, if I go to jump definition right now, so even though this is written in Kotlin in when we are compiling, but at this point, you guys can see that this is no longer Kotlin code. Okay, so this is coming from Objective-C. Okay, so whatever we write in the whatever we have written in the whatever we have written in the Kotlin, now everything is compiled down to Objective-C. So this is an Objective-C class. As you can see, there are a lot of jargons going on. We do not need to understand everything in here, but for now, remember when we have when we write the applications, when we write the things in Kotlin KMM, at the end, when we are trying to use those things gonna be compiled down to Objective-C classes. Okay, it's not gonna be in Kotlin. So in here, when we are doing the greeting.greet, invoking the greeting.greet method, you guys can remember that greeting.greet is no longer a normal function. That is gonna be a suspend function. That means it's gonna do some codes in the background or out of the main thread, and once that code section is done, we will get two things. Either we will get a greeting message or we will get an error. Okay, the success and the failure. And once we get this, what should happen is we are using something like Kotlin coroutines. Okay, we have something same in iOS. We call this the dispatch queue, where if you need to update something on the UI or something that we need to do on the main thread, we use this dispatch queue, and we are using the main async declaration in here, and we get a greeting. Okay, we will be getting this greeting, but when we are getting this greeting, it might be optional. That means this can have a value or do not have a value. Okay, it's not the error situation that I'm talking about. The value can be there, or there will be no value. Okay, so we are using the greeting. We are checking whether exactly value is there, whether it is null or not. Okay, so we are doing if let null checking in here. So if there is a greeting message, we will assign that to greeting here. Okay, not this one, but we can call this one as G or G GRE, something like that. Okay, then if there is a value, what we will do is the text message, the publish one, the one should change, should be assigned with. So we get the greetings, which is coming from the API itself. And once it is received, we need to check whether it is null, okay, by using if let conditions. If it is not null, call it gree, and we will assign that value to the text, the observable that we got. So same goes to the error situation as well. So in error situation, there are So there won't be any error unwrapping to be done for null checks. Okay, we just say else we will assign the text with the error and the localized description. The error should have a localized description. What is the description, more sensible one? If that is not represented, just show error. Okay, that is the basic of it. You just need to have either of these values. So it's pretty much easy when we are working with this kind of things. So we will have a small view model object in here. Okay, so we just have the text model, the text view in here. That is the simplest form of UI representations. And if you go to the the counterpart, Android implementation, it is going to be the same. Okay, but we do not have a view model in here right now. We're just calling out that, and we will call the mutable state of loading. We will have a variable called text, and it is having a mutable state. The initial state will be loading. And same as the view model class that we have seen in iOS, we have this launch effect. Okay, and this will give us a coroutine scope. So the text that we are trying to get is coming from greeting.text. Okay, if the greeting.text is there, it will be assigned to the variable text. And if there is an error, we first get the localized message. We'll try to get it. And if localized message is not presented, we will just put it as error. Okay, so we do not have we have some sort of sense what's going on, and you guys can see the text is the one we are changing in here. So the greeting view is a composable view. Okay, composable view in Android Compose is like a smaller chunk, a smaller view that we are interested in. So we have created a greetings view, which gonna be accepting a text and type of string, and same as in the Swift UI, you will see the text view. In here, we call these things as text widgets, text views, actually, sorry, text views, and you can assign the text, whatever the one we are passing. In here, we are passing this text, and we will render it. Okay, so that's the equivalent or the counterpart of the Swift UI application, and pretty much easy to handle. So till the Android Studio do that thing, we will go to the shared section where you will see the source, and we can see the comment section, and you can see the greeting the greeting class that we have using for this for these purposes. Okay, so we have this class called greeting, and from both iOS and Android we are calling this greet class. Okay, so we have the HTTP client, which is written in Theta. Okay, we are calling this API, and we will get the first launch out of this list. It's going to be a list at the beginning, but we will take the first one. And if it is successful, we will take the first one, but under this condition, any object, the first object in this list, under this rocket list, first one, which has the attribute success to be true, is is the one that we are interested in. Okay, so we have a list of rockets, but we will take the first one on which the success is true. So the success is a variable name or something that the rocket launch is having this one success. So it is one of the fields it's having. So we will take the success launched. Okay, and that will be the first one as well. So we will get one single first success. We'll get the first success launch instance. Okay, so other things are like pretty much the same. We have the platform name. So platform name is coming from the get platform method. Correspondingly, it will take Android or iOS, whatever the implementation of the platform, and we demonstrate the days until New Year. That is like platform independent code. This one is platform independent. It does not matter which platform you are. You can have such generic generic functions, generic variables, as long as these codes, these things are shareable. So make sure this Kotlin next date time is KMM compatible. That's why we can use these days until those kind of variables. Okay, if you do not have if you're trying to get if you're trying to get sorry, if you're trying to get to work um, with things like this clock, time zone, and local date. These all are coming from Kotlin X datetime. And we have gone through the catalog and we have seen that Kotlin X datetime is KMM compatible. So we can use these things in iOS and Android. But for some reason, the library that we are using is not Kotlin KMM compatible, and we are trying to implement that in our application. We might run into problems. Okay, so make sure the libraries, if you are using those, are KMM compatible in order to do the fix. But if you can do this calculation without using any third-party libraries, if you can manage within Kotlin, you have yeah, you can port those things, or you can have those things working in Android and iOS without an issue. Okay, and same goes here. The Kata library that we are using, the Kata library is using something called the HTTP client. So the HTTP client, where we have in iOS and Android, those are two different clients. So we have to provide each and every client on its initialization. So make sure we have that one as in place. So how did we do that? If you guys can remember, is the Gradle file Gradle. So this is for SharePoint, right? Come on. Where's the build? Sorry, this one. Build.gradle.kts, if you guys can remember. So any dependencies for common modules goes in here. That is like the common things that we can be using. Anything that for Android implementation, for example, the Kata client. Kata client has two flavors, one for Android and one for iOS. So iOS main, you should have that in iOS main, and Android main, you should have that dependency in Android main. Okay, so when we are using this class, when we are using this HTTP client, it automatically knows which client to use. The client, depending on your current platform, either Android or iOS, it will create a new instance out of this Kata client for Android or Kata client for Darwin. Okay, so both work as expected. So we will any questions up until this is like the smallest implementation. We will try to fine tune this one. Okay, this is like the hello world equivalent. This is not following a lot of MVVM stuff unless there are some MVVM things going on in Objective C class. At least we have a V model, and we are getting uh, the values from a model. The model in here is greeting, so we are good on that end for some things. But for iOS, sorry, but for Android, we are not using any MVVM component. We are just having everything in one place, and we are trying to work it out. So before we move on, before we do some more modifications on this application, do you guys have any questions up until this? Uh, okay, seems not. So so what we will do is we will make make more things in here, and we will try to understand how to organize this application and how to do more stuff in here. All right. First thing first, we will we will just get rid of this greeting message for now. So we have seen the power of this API, or how we gonna do this. But we will do more coding and try to get more meaningful content into our application rather than have based on this only the text changes that we have done. Okay, all right. So what we'll do is we will create more um, view modeling in our application. Okay, um, so so we'll create some HTTP client and try to get some data in a good way. Okay, first when we are working with the uh, Kotlin section or KMM section, most of the time we can start with the common main section where we will do most of the modeling in here. Okay, so to keep things more um, easy and to keep things more simple, I would like to so we have this rocket launch SpaceX API. We would use something like uh, use something like GitHub as for the last time. So I will create. So my main purpose is in here, like we did in Android. We'll have the GitHub API implementation in here. We'll just show username, name, and some username details on the bottom. So that's it. We will be having that, but we will be doing that in a separate way, like 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 something we did on Android, but now we will implement both iOS and Android. But we will be doing a lot of things, code sharing, especially the model will be shared. So I will say GitHub. So I know GitHub related stuff are in here, and I need to get the GitHub public API. Let me check GitHub API endpoints. What are the APIs in here? Which one is? We got the users one, right? Let me check first. What is the endpoint? Can't remember top of my head. Android Studio, SMG, app, SRC, Android main, Java. Visiting the GitHub section, GitHub service. Oops. It's api.github.com/users, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, so we'll be looking at API for GitHub /users, and we'll try to get the things in here. Let's see whether we have. Okay. So yeah, this is the API that we are interested in. So we will create first. We will first create something like we did in here. We will create a GitHub repository. Okay, so we will create a new Kotlin class, and we will call this GitHub repository. Okay, so this is going to be the model of our class, and we will have the HTTP client as usual in here. Okay, so we are not implementing something like the what do you call dependency injections in here. Dependency injections is totally available on KMM, but for simplicity, we will not use dependency injections to inject HTTP client for everywhere and everything. We will just simply use this API and we will just get some values from there. Okay. And we have the HTTP client. Now we need to do is fetch users. So this is going to be equivalent to greeting that we had in here. Okay. So we will fetch some users. So it's going to be a suspend function because it is going to block our UI. And we will say fetch users. Okay. And the return type is going to be a list of users, right? So we need to do the modeling in here. And what I'll do is I will create a new class so we can represent all the models. So I will say GitHub models, okay? And like we did in here, we will use the we will just copy paste in here and do the modification. That's easy. So I will say GitHub user. Okay, this is the GitHub user that we are interested in, and GitHub user has something called login, and it's gonna be in string. Okay, and we have an avatar URL. Okay, so I will call that avatar URL. Avatar URL. That's something like your profile picture, and we will have something like ID or not ID, or something that we are familiar with, not ID, and it is also a string. So they don't have success or something like that. So this is the model, at least the partial model. You guys can see that there is there's the login, there's the ID, avatar URL, but there are a bunch of other things which we do not need at this time. We'll just be interested in having these things only. Okay, so I am gonna model only these few things. So I will get in this way I will get a list of GitHub users. Okay, so when I'm fetching users, I will get a list of them. So like we did in the greeting class, you guys can see that I am getting a list of rocket launchers. The same goes in here. So I'll use the HTTP client dot get body, and I can even have it assigned in here. But since it is since this is like the uh, basic of our application, we do not need to like store it somewhere else, and I'll just return the function for the things that we get. So we if we want, we can use the fetch users in here, and we will get a list of users. So this is like the repository pattern that we are using for getting all the information. So once we did this, once we do this, we will get a bunch of users available within our application. Okay, so um, so yeah, now we will be able to call this GitHub repository and call fetch users, and we'll be able to get some GitHub users. All right. So what else we need? Right, fetch people. Yeah. So this is like the basic version. But if you guys think yes, this is like not the optimal way, the way of doing things. Like we do not have dependency injection and so all those things going on. So it's better if we incorporate something like coin. Coin is one of the dependency injection tools available for KMM. So you can use coin to do the dependency injection, and you guys can have the things figure out by yourself. If you guys have any troubles, let's do that some other time. But for now, to keep things easy and lazy, we will use this pattern. Okay, we will see how we can get the values in a different view model section. Okay, so first thing first, uh, we will create um, create this view model first in uh, first we will create this in Objective C. Sorry, Swift UI. See whether that is going on. So let's go to our application. So we have a simple application, and I'm not going to use this one for now. So what I will do is I will create another Swift UI so we can utilize that one. I will create a new file, and it's going to be Swift file. Okay, or you can directly create a Swift UI view. That is also possible. What I'm gonna call this is I'm gonna call this one as GitHub. So GitHub users view. Okay, it's gonna be a simple GitHub users view. I'll create that. I don't need these things. So right now it has a GitHub user view and it has a preview that we can use. And we have a hello world text that we can preview upon. If we really want to see the preview, we can go to the canvas section over here and I can refresh. So it will take some time to show upon. Till that happens, what we'll do is you can see the hello world basic called uh, basic call, basic structure that we want to see. That's it. And I'll remove the canvas so I don't need the preview. First thing I will need to do is I need to uh, create the view model for this. Okay, GitHub user view model. So like we did in Android, we can create group in here. So I can right click on the application itself and I can create a new group. Okay, so it's like creating a directory. I will name this one as GitHub. So I know every code that is related to GitHub is in here. So I'll move the existing code, at least the GitHub user view in my GitHub section, and I will create another file which is gonna be not a view but a view model. So I will call this GitHub user view model. Okay, this is like my kind of way of doing naming convention, but if you guys need, you can have your own way of doing the view, the naming. It's up to you, but this I find it's easy, and the foundation is here. I think I no longer need that, but I'll keep in here for now. So I will create the view model class first. So I'll create a class uh, GitHub users view model. So view model, and remember, since it's going to be observable object, we have to specify it observable object. All right, that means this is an object that will be used, that will be changed over time. The fields that we having in here will change over time, and we that will be utilized in our views or somewhere else. So next thing is we need to have the models that we were talking about. So we will have a published variable of users. Okay, it's GitHub users. I will just have them name as users. So to make it clear, I would say GitHub users. Okay, so we have GitHub users, and we will have a list of them. Okay, you guys can see that in our KMM, we have a list of GitHub users. Okay, that's what we wanted. So let's see how we can define a GitHub users list in here. Now, so I have used the GitHub users in here. Since it is not known, I have to import that from shared. So let's see whether it is. Yes, it is not giving me an error right now. So we have a list of GitHub users. Okay, I will have a list of GitHub users, but I can't initiate it. So I will just put a new constructor in here. Okay, so I will have a list of GitHub users, and you guys can see immediately if I click on this command click and hit jump to definition. So under shared, you will find GitHub user objects and everything that we need. So you might not understand this code. Even I can't understand. This is like totally generated code, but it represents the GitHub user, the model that we have created in here. Let's see whether we are having the same variables and everything over there. All right, we have published a GitHub user view model. Okay, now we need to get the values in here. So we need to this is like the users that we're going to handle, but in order to get the users, we need to have the repository. Okay, so we will create the repository here. So I will create a private variable. Let call repository, and it's gonna be GitHub uh, GitHub repository. Did I name it as GitHub repository? Yes, I named it at GitHub repository. So I am going to use that in order to get the GitHub users. So you can see when I am typing in, I get the auto correction, I get the classes in here as well. So when we are initializing the class, I will have to provide the repository of GitHub users, that like constructor injector, GitHub repository, and I will say whatever the repository that I am getting when I'm initializing this view model, I will assign it to this local variable. So I have to say self repository equal to repository that I am getting on the constructor. So I have a GitHub repository instance that I will be creating, and when I get the repository, I will assign it to this local variable. Okay, so the next thing I will need to do is I need to create the functions for all those things. So I will create a function get, or I can say fetch users. Okay, so fetch users will utilize the underlying repository and get the users as I need. So I can call repository, and I can say fetch users, and fetch users will have two handlers, compilation handlers, one for success, one for error. Okay, so the success will have list of users, and the other one will have error. So like we did in the previous section, so we have users in here, and we have error in here. So these are like the two things that we will get. So if I say users dot count, that means it's gonna map all the users the number of users and everything. I can look into that. And if I want just to set the users, all the GitHub users that I have see in here, better use the same name here, success data. So self dot GitHub users equal GitHub users. Okay, so there you get the value of optional. That means the GitHub users that we are retrieving is an optional value. So in order to set the optional value, we have to unwrap it, or we need to be make sure. So, so what we do is we unwrap it. That means optional unwrapping. And I will say users equal GitHub users. Okay. So now what happens is these GitHub users that we are getting is no longer optional type. That means if we have values for GitHub users, then this code section should execute. Okay. So GitHub users right now, if there is a value, for these GitHub users, assign it to variable called users, and within this block, the users is no longer optional like we have in GitHub users. This users is no longer optional, the values are there, and we can get the users from here. And the error, of course, if there is an error, what we can do is we can just assign something. Right now I will just leave it empty, and we only work in the success scenario right now, but we can have error stream later on. Let's see how we can do that as well. So right now we have a GitHub user model. It will give us GitHub users, and initially the repository will have this, and it will once we call this fetch GitHub users, it will get the users. Once it is successful, it will assign that to GitHub users in here. All right. So we need to call this in some place. So before we do that, what we will do is, this is our view model that is done. We go to our view, and within the view, we will create our view models, and we will initiate that. Okay, so we are in our view. Now we need to initiate our view model. We need to create an instance of GitHub user view model. So we will do that by creating at observed object and variable. I can call GitHub user view model. If this is too much, we can call view model, or even if this is too much, we just call it VM. Okay, as long as you can understand, that is fine. And we need the instance of GitHub view model, and it is asking us a GitHub repository. So we will create a new GitHub repository instance. Okay, so GitHub repository is not something known for this view, so we might need to import the shared sections. And so when we are creating a GitHub users view model, we need a place to get we need the repository instance. We create a GitHub repository right here, and we get a GitHub view model. Okay, that's very simple on that scenario. And what we will do is we will create a list. Okay, rather than a text, we will create a list. So this is a list view that we are interested in, and for the list we need to give, okay, what are the things that we need to show, and how we gonna show it. So what is the data source in here? The data source is vm.github users. So within the VM, we have list of GitHub users, and there is the next thing, we need to provide the ID. ID, I will say what is the one item that we can find in the variable, which is more identifiable. So we have the avatar URL, we have the login, and we have the node ID. I think out of these things, node and the node ID and the login ID would be something unique. So you guys can see that when we are going with the list, it automatically asks what is the list and what is the unique identifier for one of the list item. And surprisingly enough, now we can see all the models that we have done, the node ID, login, and the avatar URL, which we did in KMM, modeling in here. The login, avatar URL, node ID, all are appear in our Swift codes. Okay, so uh, we have done the code integration. Uh, we have done a successful code integration. Now for a list item, what we should show. Okay, first item, a single item we will call a user, and within in here what we need to show. So we can create a text view in here, and just to show this one is working, I will take the user dot, let's say, login. Okay, for keeping this very simple, we'll just show in the list view a simple user dot login. Okay, but thing is, we need to initiate the VM model like what we have done here, unless we call the fetch user, it won't get any users. The user will be empty. So this initially this will be empty. Okay, so let's see first whether we have any errors on this application by running. But we won't see any users because we haven't initiated the fetching part. Okay, sorry. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to have this GitHub user view initiated from other than the content view. So I will go to this content view and remove it and have the GitHub so GitHub view. So in the GitHub view, this one, okay. I need to provide the VM in here. Content view, not the content iOS app. I can create the VM here, or I just VM. What? How did I create in the content view? Okay, set it in the view model. So I will do that rather than creating the view model in here. I will create it in here. VM, I will say GitHub user repository, and this will be a GitHub user repository like this. I need to import it. Import shared. Okay, so we have GitHub users, GitHub user, GitHub v require me a VM, and I'm providing a VM. The VM need a repository, and I'm also providing the repository. If you like, you can do it in here as well, but for now, I will just keep it simple. All I need to do is I need to replace this with object private set within my view, object private set VM, and I can just say the type is gonna be GitHub view model. GitHub user views. I will just remove the preview for now. Okay, let me stop it. Let me try to run it again. Build success. Right now, you guys can see there is nothing coming in here because the view model have not initiated anything. So what I'll do is I'll just go in here. So I have the repository. I can make it a little bit easy by saying let VM equals GitHub view model, and I can pass the VM here. So it is like much more readable. Okay, rather than having the GitHub view model in here, I will have a defined in here, and it will work as the same. No issues. Yes, but we have not in GitHub view model. We are listing out the all the GitHub users, but the problem is we are not calling the fetch fetch user function. This function should be called in order to get the users from the repository. From the repository, we need to ask for the data. Once it is asked, the repository will fetch and it will populate the GitHub users here. Right now, we are not calling that in anyhow anywhere. What we can do is we can do a few things. We can create a button, okay, and you can say in button we have a text view, and we can say within text view I can say fetch users, okay, and the action for this button. Um, so this is like the body. What we need is the action. Button, title key and action. This is like the way we do. First, the button content, I'll say text, and for the action I would say VM fetch users. Initialize action. I think I can just do not need. Okay, so I'll create a button called fetch users, and what will happen, the fetch user will show us a nice UI button, and when the UI button is click, the action that we want to perform is I'm going to call VM fetch users. So by that logic, it will go to the view model, and view model will call this fetch user. Once the repository is called, repository fetch users is going to be used. Once the data is here, it will assign it to users. It will assign it to GitHub users. Okay. So once the GitHub users is uh, received, the view in here, GitHub view, you guys can see, view have the list of users texted out in here. Let's see that in action, whether it is working or not. So build is success. So I have a fetch user button right on the top, and if I click on it, there you go. I have a list of users which is coming from GitHub. Okay, and uh, this is like the basic version. What we can do is we can have a nice UI built for this. Let me check. We have Swift UI list templates. Da, da, da. So we can have something like VStack. Okay, remember these things. These things are really important. The UI elements. So V stack is a vertical stack. That means on top another. And we have something like H stack. That means horizontal stack, one after another. So I will first take a H stack. That means a horizontal stack. And the first item would be an image. Okay. And I can call the user dot avatar URL. Let's see gonna what is gonna look like. Let's fetch the users. And it is not showing anything. Let me check why. I think we have to add some Swift UI fetch images from URL. We have to use something called async images, otherwise it won't work. Okay, not the basic image, but we have a call something async image, and the async image is asking for us a URL, and we need to provide a URL instance, URL, and from string I will provide this one. Async image is available on iOS 16. Okay, let's fix it. That means uh, this code section, the async image, is only gonna be working with iOS 15 and only afterwards. Okay, so if we are in iOS 15 or above, async image will show. If we do not have that, we will show just a rectangle. Rectangle with the size of we'll show a rectangle. It's with the frame width will be 20, 20, and height will be 20 as well. So what this happens is we will be creating a H stack, a horizontal stack. If it is iOS 15 or later, we will use this uh, async image. It will require the URL. The URL is coming from user.avatar URL. If not, if we do not have iOS 15, just show a small rectangle. Okay. So let's run this one more time. We'll click on the fetch users. Okay, there you go. We have list of users showing up in here. You guys can see some users popping up, the avatar URLs. So what I will do is I will um, yeah, I will make these things like in a more uh, framed manner, so that I will say width is like 30 and height is also 30. That means if I'm getting an image, I will frame it for 30 and 30, otherwise it will go nuts. Let's run it one more time. Hit fetch users. And it is not looking that good. What's the main reason? Probably the image size that I am working is not that good. Do I have any variables that I can say? I have the scale. That's it. Let's see how we can async image. Swift UI resize. Okay. Okay, I have the content section over here, so I can define more variables rather than the URL. And I have this content. It does not. Do I have content? Internet say it has, but not showing in here. URL. URL user dot. I think I have to go with max width and max height. Rather than 30, I would make it more like 50 or 50. Let's see whether this works. Let's run it once more time. Hit the fetch users. Yeah, even that it is not honoring the image width, right? Let me see what I can do. Okay, and I have the image option in here. We have image, can say image resizable. Let me get the exact one, otherwise I'm wasting time. Let me do some code formatting. Okay, I have the image. It's user dot. Take this user dot the URL. Placeholder, it's showing a progressive view 50-50. Let's give it one more try. I'll call the fetch users. There you go. It looks nice, much better. So what I did was I used the async image and URL. Okay, and the URL will be from the user avatar URL. And once it is loaded, I get an image instance and I will make the image resizable. Otherwise, this won't work. And there is the other option, placeholder. Placeholder means while it is loading, what should happen. And I will just simply show a progress view. And I will frame this whole asynchronous image to 50 by 50. Um, 50 by 50 uh, 50 by 50 frame area. Okay, so if you are coming from an older version and it won't show you this asynchronous image, rather than it will show a rectangle of 50-50. So now you guys can see I was able to get the users in here, user list at least, all the user images that we want to see. And since this is H tag, I can have one single H tag in here, and the next one I will create a V stack, okay, vertical stack. And first one is going to be a text. The text is going to be user dot, let's say, login. Okay. The next text I am going to have user dot not id. Okay. Let's run it once again. Hit fetch users. There you go. So we have the uh, usernames and all those things coming in here, and we have the image in here. It is not the best UI in the world, but it is something. So I can say HTAG alignment. So how it should align the these things. First, I will go with leading. That means everything will be on here. Alignment, it's going to be leading, and the font for this, and I will say font dot I will say this is something like a caption, so it is little bit bigger than the other one. Fetch users, I know it's the other way, so I will put caption in here for the note, and I can say size. Oops, better if I what has happened in here. I will put caption, the font type, and run it again. I'll hit fetch users, and there you go. Things are a little bit improving. Okay, and I can say foreground. I can make font weight. Font dot. Let's say it is title kind of a font. I'm not sure whether it's going to be huge or not. Yeah, it's going to be huge. Font title. Let me run it once again. Fetch it. Yeah, it's not the best UI looking UI out there, but it is something. So you guys can see that we are getting list of users, and we are showing it in in a list view. Okay, and we are using MVVM in order to do that. So the UI that we have created right now, it's gonna be a list, and the list is getting data from the VM, VM GitHub users, and we will give an identifier for each item. And the UI gonna be put in all these things in H tag, Stack means horizontal text. That means the image is one item. Next item is this is the image. Okay, this is how we get the image and show, and that's gonna be also working something like if there is iOS 15 available, use async image and resize the image while you are doing it. If you can while loading, put a placeholder, and the placeholder will be a progressive view and frame it to 50-50. If so some case this is lower than iOS 15, show a rectangle with a small frame of 50-50. Okay, if you are since my simulator is 16.4, I do not get an error on this. I will get this one without an issue. And this is the image part, and the next thing is the vertical stack. That means the second item in here, the name two names that we see here, and it is a vertical stack, and the alignment is leading. That means all the things that we see is leading to the beginning, and there will be two text fields, one with the login, one with the node ID, and it since this is a vertical stack, it will stack upon on top of another. And we have changed some font attributes in here. The font title, the font actually to be a title, and the second text, the node ID, where we are showing it to be a caption. So it's nice and smooth. You don't have to work on these things. Uh, other thing that we can do uh, rather than fetching these users by clicking on it, what we can do is we can say when the list is appearing, uh, fetch the data. So I can say on appear to perform something. I can say vm dot fetch users. Okay, so rather than clicking on the button, I can say, okay, this is the list. When the list is on appearing, fetch the users. So that way I get rid of the button and it is gonna fetch the data at the initial stage. Okay, so you can, I'm not gonna go into much more detail with the uh, Swift UI stuff in here, because I know for sure a lot of you guys do not have uh, Macintosh to uh, uh, practice these things out. But in other way, in your when you are practicing these things out, when you are like remembering this, have the concept clearly with you guys. Okay, so what I have talked, what sort of things that we have talked in here, especially the VM, how do we do the injection of the view model, how do we populate in a list, and how do we call the VM to fetch data, what is the action that we are saying, how to use a H stack, how to use a V stack, and get some sort of small UI like this. Okay, so these kind of things at least you guys have to remember, and remember in the sense, do not like get the things like uh, hard coded in your memory. Okay, I'm not expecting this, but if I were to give you some um, assignment or something like that, you need to be able to explain what this is. Okay, that's the only requirement. If I were to give you, sure, if I were to give you something like this, you guys should be able to explain line by line what is happening in this code. Okay, that's the simplest expectation from you. Any questions from these guys? Anything that you guys need to uh, clarify? You have any questions with this? So you guys can see that we implemented the MVVM pattern. The VM is so the model is completely on a different different platform. It is a shared one. Okay, so that makes our life way much easier. So if we were to do the coding, if we want to do the mhm, if you want to do the model coding, we have to do it only once. Okay, and we can share the logic behind that in here. Okay, we have to worry about the VM and the in the view itself. Okay, so we get a truly native application with shared logic. Yeah, any questions up until this? Because we will be doing the same thing with Android with Jetpack Compose, and you will see that how much resembles both of these platforms have. So you guys get the native experience in two different frameworks. Okay. Any questions? Vatsala, Gimhani, Tarindu, Abhishek? Abhishek, any questions? Vatsala, any questions? No? Petu? Gimhani?
So it's clear.
Okay. So we did a huge UI just by simply few lines of code, and the view model itself, it is fairly simple. And the code itself, the repository pattern that we are doing in here, even that is not that huge. We are utilizing few of the things that we are having in here. And we'll do the same thing in here um, in our Android application. Okay, we'll do the exact same replica with this. Okay, so we have the main application, main activity around here. Right now we are having the mutable state and everything. We will just remove this composable state and try to get something more useful. So first I need to create the same exact thing that we have done, um, but in different language. Okay, so we will create the view model. Okay, and we will use the view model to do the uh, fetching and all those things in our application. So I will create a different package in here. Okay, so since this is GitHub things, I will say GitHub. This module is going to be GitHub, and like what we did, I will create a Kotlin class called GitHub. It's gonna be the the repository is done. So I have to work with GitHub user view model. Okay, so you guys can see the counterpart in here, GitHub users view model. Same thing, GitHub users. Refactor, rename. I will use the same naming convention so you guys don't get um, um, don't get confusion. And we have to use the repository. Okay, repository, and the repository is going to be GitHub repository that we have created. Okay, and like what we do, like what we did in extending the view model in here, we have used observable object, but in here we are using view model. Okay, from view model is coming from Kotlin X lifecycle. All right, so we have to initiate it, otherwise it's wrong. Got it. All right, and the next thing is we need to create the. You guys can remember we have the publish GitHub users. Okay, this is the Android and sorry, iOS version. Okay, but we have the same thing with Val, but name is GitHub users, and rather than it is published or annotated, we use mutable live data, right? Mutable live data, and we will have a list of GitHub users. Okay, so this is the initialization for the initial state. Now you guys can see the initial state. We will have empty. So I can say empty list. Now I have a list of GitHub users. Okay. Now for your reference, I will put. Uh, I'll just have the comment in here, which is from iOS. Okay, just for your reference. And this is the same thing, but in a different language. But we have the published. We have mutable live data. That's the only different. Now for the initialization, what we need is view model scope. That is the scope that we're going to be running this thing, and we will launch. This is the equivalent of no, it's not the equivalent, but it is like the initial we will be calling, and we are taking. We can do what we did in here. We call the fetch users. Right now we will do the initial call. The same thing. You can do the same thing in here with the initialization of the GitHub user. Now we have a method. In here we will do it in the initial call, and we need to set the value in here, GitHub users. But first we need to get the value from the repository, fetch users, and we will get a list of users. And what we can do is set that GitHub users dot value to that fetch users. Okay. What is property GitHub would be private. Okay, make this private. Yeah, we will be using something like fetching this one out of here. You can, if you guys can remember, we have the private and the public way of accessing this. You can do that, or you can just directly access the public method, but recommended to have a private and a public interface for those things. All right, so we have the users. Now what we need to do is we have launched the repository to fetch the users. At the initial phase, we will get a list of users. So the Kotlin view model is the same, in a little bit different. So what we need to do? What we need to do is we have to have the this is the view model. Now we need to create the view. Okay, and we can model the same thing, but something similar if you like. So we will take the values from the view model. Okay, so we have the main activity in here. Yes, we have the main activity. So we will create the view model, private variable, VM for short, and it is gonna be GitHub user view model, type of GitHub user view model. And what we can do is we can provide it by view model GitHub VM by Amazon, and we need to create the view model, right? AI structure. And by keyword is not working. We'll create a new compose initialization. Second, it is by view model. Check, there is an error. By view models. By view models, then we have. Okay, there you go. So to initiate the VM, we just call by view models. So it knows what we are referring. In here, you can see that this one is having the life cycle view model in here. So by calling by view models, it automatically do the injection over here. All right. Next thing that we need to do is in the set content method, and we have the view model in here. Okay, I'll just comment these things out for now. I do not need this greeting. I do not want to have preview and all. So I will just take the people and show it in a column. Okay. So we have the material theme, and I will call val users equals plus observe. This is new keywords. Observe VM dot GitHub users. Observe is coming. We are observing, right? Observe reader, okay. Mutable live data, that one is correct. Da, da, da. What is wrong in here? Let me check. Mutable live data, okay. Well, that is correct. Observe read write object concurrented, okay. Found mutable live data, no value plus. Should observe, right? Yeah. Observe is coming from the import is correct. Let me check. There's an error in here. Observe and get live data. See, observing live data from virtual VM. Now I need to be more specific. Get back compose seems to be changed. Live data. The episode I will not it. The unreadable. Give me a second. Things have changed a little bit. Okay, we have the view module. Okay, view module. And observe as observe. view model. Okay, that's very correct. VM dot GitHub users. Okay, that is correct. Da, 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 da. Okay, let me go back. The view model implementation we had earlier on. Okay, I think I can mutable state of remembering. Okay, this VM GitHub users, and it is mutable state of empty list. GitHub users. Empty list of GitHub users. I'm sorry, that is. Da, da, da. Compose have changed a lot. Okay, I will say users. Give me a second, guys, in here. Users. Okay. I'll create simple column for now. And I will use users. Composable rows and that, and I say use that. Mm, we will have a text of use say login. Let me check whether this one works quickly. This one is for Android. It again. And seems to be I'm not getting anything. Let me check. First of all, let's check the VM is initializing the model. GitHub view model initializing the values. Let's lock the GitHub. Let's say GitHub, and I'll say GitHub users value. First one, and I'll say login. Let's see whether we get any values. Initial value is not loading. Let's see the initialization works. No, apparently nothing works. View model. We have view model in our use case, but view model is not also working. Let's see on the onCreate is working. Debugging is gonna be hard on this. OnCreate. Okay, so we know onCreate function is working. Okay, onCreate is working. That means up to this level we are good. But our view model does not get created. The init function does not get connected. Let me check where did I do wrong. Jetpack compose VM index. Let me check. We have those things. Modifier. Okay. We have created the view model. And can I create by simply calling view model? Mm, and might need some other dependencies. Let me check whether I have that. Um, have compose UI, compose material. That's it, right? Okay. Let me create a view model in a different way. Mm, nice. That is okay. Create the composable. Mm, add composable function. Git hub users. Okay. Then GitHub users will have a VM. It's gonna be GitHub user view model, and it is coming from view model. Mm, function is no longer there. Okay, let's see what's the issue. View model not found. Mm, 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 mm. Okay, my dependencies trees is not correct. Let me check. What else options we have? KMM, Jetpack, Compose. It can be fragment or navigation, curtain scope. Okay, a couple of things we can do is creating a view model of our own. This is one of the examples. GitHub user view model, and we need to provide a repository. Which one? It is GitHub repository, a normal GitHub repository. Let's find that works. GitHub repository. Okay, that seems to be working. Let's see. And I need to use composable in here rather than putting in here. I will just call the GitHub users. View model, and I will have column. Do not need this. This import is also not correct. Yeah, value seems to be coming. Okay, that's a good sign. On create, init, and the values are setting. That's good. And now for the part, why do not we get the view in place? Let's have a simple text in here. Let's say Andika. See whether Andika is showing up. Okay, that is working. And why users are not coming in? That is the next question. View model, GitHub users, we have the value. Probably it is think what I am doing in here it is wrong. Let me check. Users by view model.github users. Mm, view model might have an issue. I think initial value is working. Let's go to the view model once again. This is working. Something wrong I'm doing in here for sure. Values are coming. Uh, Users view model. It seems to be not working. We will compose. There's a missing library. Let's see whether that fix. Um, view model, we need to get it from GitHub view model. Okay. Wait one more time. Seems to be crashing. Yeah, I think I would do offline research on this, guys. The implementation that I used to do is heavily changed. So I think I won't be able to do it now, but I will take a little bit more time on this and give an update on you guys. Okay, um, sorry for the delay that I tried this even. I was hoping I could pull it over, but seems to be a lot of things have changed, especially with the view model binding. I used a different method. Now the method that I have tested out, it's completely different. It's gone. But anyhow, we got this working on Android, so that's at least we got this in iOS. At least that is fine. Maybe a lot of things I have missed is with the VM binding. Earlier, the view model is perfectly working. Right now, it seems to be changed for some reason. Sorry about that. I will get back to you on how we can do the same thing in Android. Okay, it should be in that. It shouldn't be that of much big thing. But better yet, I will get all the things updated from my end, and I will give you guys the update. What's went wrong? Why this was not working as expected? Okay, probably I'll dial it down to composable states, and we will work after that. Like in iOS we have things like the GitHub view content. We have the GitHub view model and GitHub view as well. So this is like a separate component that we can reuse. In that way, we will also do it in Android. So we will create a GitHub user, like a composable view, and use that in here. Sorry, it did not work as I expected, but let's see. It happens to me, and it can happen to you. Okay, think uh, that's it for the MVVM implementation with Jetpack Compose and everything. You guys have any questions that I need to clarify before we proceed? At least with KMM and anything. So composable things, I think you guys can check that out. I mean, after I get the things sorted out, you guys can definitely go ahead with the MVVM and everything, even though you can't test things with Swift UI. Definitely composable things and things should be uh, feasible for you guys. So everybody in here have tried out the Jetpack Compose, right? I have tried out Jetpack Compose. Please raise your hand if you have tried out Jetpack Compose. I have not come checked with Jetpack Compose. I have not played around it. I think we have worked with XML based one. Anyone who have not played with Compose? Everybody has worked with Compose or not? Raise your hand, please, if you have not worked. I have not worked. I have worked with Compose. Okay, Gimhani has worked. Okay. How about others? Okay, so since we have a little bit of time left, I think I'll give you a little bit of what do you call um, a round tour on Jetpack Compose then. So you guys will get know GitHub Compose when you are uh, trying this out. So if you guys can remember when we are working with XML layout, most of the time what we did was we have working with uh, we in creating XML layout. It is something okay, but as you guys can see, the layer managing those components and XML is getting a little bit harder hard harder when you have more than when you have more than few smaller components. Okay, so if you take a look at the trend right now, uh, frameworks like Swift UI is gaining more popularity. That's because they use the declarative language, something like this, where we can declare the UI by the code itself. Okay, so Android Jetpack Compose brings the same sort of feeling to us. So we just can code from the uh, we can create the UI from the code rather than dragging and dropping the XML stuff. So for iOS, we had the storyboard as well. Okay, storyboard was like something similar to XML we had earlier. But moving onwards, most of the things will be in declarative manner like this. Okay, so everything that we see in here is simple composable function. Okay, the function will declare the view and we can show it in here. So there are built-in ones that we can use. There are ones where we have to create some sort of things to show something. For example, if we want to show text, we can have the built-in text view, and text will show anything that we like. Okay, and if I play this, of course, like in Swift UI, we have the previews where we can show these things rather than running on a simulator. So if when we use the text, what we can do is, okay, text view will have input of text and what it is going to show. And there can be many modifiers to this, like there will be modifiers where we can change the color. Okay, where we can change the color. In here we can get color, like let's say I want it green, and the text why when we apply the modifier, the text view that we're gonna see it's gonna change. I'm not sure whether the screen is super helpful, but let me like make it red. So by using these modifiers, what we can do is we can show these things in we can modify the text or whatever the view that we are seeing in here, so it's easy to manipulate. So there are like things like a lot of views in here, so especially columns and rows. Those are like the main uh, basics layouts in a Compose UI. So we can use those things in a way. So for example, let me put Randika in here and have to put in here in color, let's say blue. Okay, now if I execute this, so what will happen in here? You can see these two are like jumbled together. They don't have any position whatsoever. So in order to make them appear in a column manner, like what we see in SwiftUI a V stack, we can use the column, and there can be modifiers for column as well. If you do not have anything, you just have everything in the column space. Okay, so if I run it again, now the values that we need to show is showing under a simple column. Okay, and say for instance we need to create a simple row like we created in uh, our GitHub UI, the showing of the user. So we have an image, we have this two text. So I think two text is almost already done. So if you want to wrap these in a row, like a single row, you can have the row view. Okay, right now it's not gonna have anything on it. It's gonna have a column. If you want to have an image, we can use the image. And there are like things that we need to put in here. Let me get the Jetpack Compose image. How we can get a loading an image. Yeah, so it's gonna be easy. So this image one have things like asynchronous image. Okay, we have like we did have in what do you call SwiftUI. You can remember the async image. We have the same for Jetpack Compose. So we can use async image, async image, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Um, so um, So async image is not like out of the box function that we get. We need to have it as a dependency. Okay, so let's see how we can get that async image. It is from a package called coil. Okay, so we need to implement coil in our application. So it's easy, like we did in our project. We have the build section. Make sure this is Android only. So we have to use the coil compose in our dependency. Like iOS, we do not have this async image by default in here. So we have to use third-party dependency in order to do that. And make sure you do not incorporate these things in the shared section. Okay, these are not like shared modules. These are like specific to Android specific things. So we do not get mixed up with the dependencies. I think almost done. I'll import async image now. Still, there are a little bit of downloading going on, and what we need in here, the image model in the sense where we gonna get the image, the URL in this example. So I will use one of the HTTP avatars that I got from the GitHub URL, since it is a non-working one. Okay, let me do coil compose async image. Yes, that one is correct. Create. So I need this one in here. Okay. So we can have an async image like this and see whether this works. Yeah, there you go. So in a scenario like where we want to load an image, use a third-party dependencies like coils async image, and you get the image in here. And for other things, like creating a list or anything like that, we need to get that data coming from the API, which we failed to do. So we'll look into that. For now, all you guys need to do is going going with Jetpack Compose and everything. I'll share you guys components where you guys can um, you guys can get an idea on what are the things available, what are things that we can do. For example, if we want, let's say we want a button, we can have like something like button, and on click is what need to happen. And other than that, the content padding, we can put the content padding in here if you like, or we can just have the uh, scopes of things that we need to do. And for now, if I want an text to be here, I would say like text, and I will have the text like click here. And if I play it again within this row as a uh, third section, we got a click here button on here. Okay, so these buttons they are not like built-in ones, but if I'm not mistaken, the button is coming from material, the Jetpack Compose material section. So we get a nice button. So I have this basic um, basic section where you guys can go along, like layouts, how the layouts are working, how do you make rows, is it boxes and those kind of things. Let me share in the chat in here. Okay, so follow along those components. It is like one of the most important things that you guys need to know. And once you are done, go with modifiers. Okay, so I'm not gonna go with a lot of things talking in modifiers, how the modifiers works and everything. Just uh, told you guys what is a modifier, but it's not possible to remember all the modifiers from each and every view. That is not possible, but you guys should be able to think and guess what this modifier is all about. For example, the text and the color within the text, the color, sorry, the color modifier just would change the text color in here. That's kind of thing I would expect you guys from you. Okay, and there are like a lot of modifiers that we can work with. Uh, create create a list view and show a bunch of usernames. Those can be hard coded, like for example, take the values from GitHub API and put a list of users in here and see whether that is something that you can do. Just have the values in hard-coded user values like the name and everything, and try to reproduce a list view, something like we have seen in here. Okay, something here, rather than taking the data from the REST API, hard code those values in here, and you guys can have a nice view in here. Then afterwards we can bind the values from rather than a hard coded one to have these things in um, from an API or something like that, something similar. Okay, so try to get this list view working in Jetpack Compose. We will do the binding next time. Okay, and learn the basic of components, these modifiers and everything. Okay, and that way you guys will have a lot of information about how these things work. Actually, for both, I would not uh, I would not like ask you to remember things from Swift UI. That's because uh, you guys do not have access to Mac, most of the you guys. So I'm not expecting, but remember these things once you have like given example to explain this code. You should be able to do that because it's self-explanatory most of the time, and we have worked through this code, so you guys can revisit and see whether this is true or not. Okay, so the view model and view, this is something you guys should know even in the Swift UI. For now, so Jetpack Compose, create a few rows and having these hardcode values, and check whether you guys can mimic or get the same UI that we see in here in the same manner in here. Okay, let's do it for now. And so know the changes that we are facing from by using Jetpack Compose. Okay, Jetpack Compose is a little bit different than what we used to do with Android with XML. Okay, so practice these things. Have a small UI composed from your end, and it will be easy for you guys to do the coding once we know the basic elements, once we know the basic views and all. Yep. For now, for today, I think um, uh, these these activities would do till I think next Monday. So please practice Kotlin and Jetpack Compose things. I'll definitely get back on the view model implementation. Sorry about that. It was a lot of those things have been changed compared to SwiftUI. SwiftUI is like pretty much the same as we left, but for Compose they have changed a lot. That's the nature of the Compose. Throughout years, um, the fundamentals of these things have changed, especially with the VMM observability. I will get back to you guys on that, how we can utilize the VM model. All right, I'll stop recording.